one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to introduce our participants for this afternoon. Starting at my far right is Ms. Marion Southwick, Clerk of the Board. In the back, joined by his team, is Dr. Sean Hucker, Superintendent. To my immediate left is Mr. Casey Morrisroe, Vice Chair, Ms. Leslie Bierke, Board Member, Ms. Heather Tenbrink, Board Member, Ms. Allie Anderton, Board Member, and I'm Rebecca Smith, Board Chair. We do not take public comment at special meetings and workshops. Comments may be submitted to the board via email at trustees@cdaschools.org or in writing through the clerk. Thank you. I'd like to thank the community for voting last week. I'd like to thank all of my fellow trustees for all of our work over the past few months. I'd like to thank Dr. Hawker and your admin for your work as well. And we've received tremendous feedback and public comment from the community over the last week, which brings us to today. I'd like to turn this meeting then over to Dr. Hawker for a morning presentation right after we approve our agenda. So, is there a motion, please, to approve our agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda is passed. Dr. Hawker.
All right, thanks, Chair Smith and members of the board. Appreciate you scheduling this special meeting today. And as we discuss the future path and direction of Coeur d'Alene School District, and as well as I would be as bold to say the future of the community of Coeur d'Alene. I think there's a lot to discuss tonight. Want to take just a couple of seconds here and just give you a brief overview of our of the election from last week on Tuesday. We had a tremendous voter turnout, largest ever, over 17,000 voters. You can see there that the in favor and against, super close. You can see that really a couple hundred of the against moving to the in favor would create more than a 50% support there for that levy. The plant facility levy did garner roughly 1,000 more yes votes in favor, but still fell short of the state required 55%, just barely. So tonight we've got some questions and some comments in regards to next steps. Over the last week, we've heard a lot of conversations from a lot of folks, a lot of caring folks, and one of the conversations had to do with perpetuity. So I put that up there as a specific point of interest to just make sure we're very clear. First and foremost, the perpetuity ability requires a levy to be on the books for X amount of years in a row. Because this vote that just occurred last week was not in favor, does not necessarily mean that perpetuity is now off the books for the next 7 years. It is there has to be a levy on your books for the last 7 years. And so there is a possibility, should there be a rerun in May, and that if that levy were to happen to pass, maybe in the future, if you decided to run a perpetuity vote, it would still be eligible. So just want to make sure we're clear on specifically that. However, I think we've all heard over the last week that probably one of our biggest hurdles was that perpetuity conversation. And I think just not enough people understood the gravity of the levy and the perpetuity components. I still absolutely, wholeheartedly, fundamentally believe that the perpetuity levy was the right ask. It's the right thing to do for lots of reasons. And as I've shared previously, the levy is no longer able to be identified with an item or two or three or 10. It is literally 25% of everything that goes on in a school district. And as such, I think over the years, it has lost some of that specific immediacy as to what it funds. And so it's been just very difficult to re-envision that and help our community understand what all this levy funds. So we presented that in a perpetuity, and the board supported that perpetuity request on the levy. But as you can see, it did not pass. And so now we are faced with next steps. This is the first time in 30-plus years, nearly 40 years, that the supplemental levy has not passed. So we need to talk about next steps. I want to just highlight, in a nutshell, I could go on with 10 slides of details, and I just don't have the time to do that. But I want to just point out that in effect, just for our community to make sure they're aware, the loss of 25% of our funding is equivalent to closing 4.5 schools. So essentially, what our community, those that voted, have said that they would like to do is close 4.5 of our schools. And yet, over the last week, as I have had conversations with multiple people, I've asked, so exactly what schools would we close? And there's no answer. Everybody knows our schools are full and packed. But 25% of loss of funds means 25% loss everywhere across the board. And so that really does mean empty classrooms. That would mean larger teacher class sizes. So we would lose staff. So you can't spread the kids out into 2 classrooms in the school. So we would end up with essentially a quarter of our school classrooms likely empty, which again, as you know, is not a very good efficiency scale. And so that's where I can make this analogy that it's essentially equivalent to closing 4.5 schools. But on top of that, it's even more than that. In addition to closing 4.5 of our schools, which I think we would all be very struggling with today to identify even which one school we might close, let alone 4.5, it also includes everything else that's up on that bullet list and many, many, many more items. But specifically to point out some, that it includes the canceling of all sports and extracurricular activities. And that's a huge deal, obviously. We understand the significance of all of those. We understand the significance of everything that the school district does for our students, and that's why losing 0.25% of our funding is so significant. This means no school resource officers or campus security officers on our grounds. It means no mental health department. It means reducing our nursing staff down to the very bare minimum and maybe beyond. It means no new curriculum. As many of you know, every year we renew our curriculum. We have consumables that we have to purchase again the next year. We would no longer be able to do that. And then, of course, electives that, the state does require a few electives at the high school level, but the vast majority of electives, especially those at the elementary school level, are not required by the state. And we would need to cut each and every one of those electives. So today, what we want to do is set the stage for what our recommendation is. And our recommendation is this. We recommend that we go back out to our community with a $25 million supplemental levy, just like we did this last time, but remove the perpetuity piece. Just do it for another 2 years. And then, despite our wishes and despite how close the plant facility levy was, it's our recommendation as well that we hold off on running that at this time. We've received a whole lot of conversations as to, why are our facilities in this situation in the first place? Why don't we have the funds set aside to take care of our facilities? And I can only reiterate for 1,000,001th time, we need a funding stream of $7 million to be able to take care of our deferred maintenance in our district, and there is no funding stream of $7 million in our books. So we're going to always have deferred maintenance, and it's just going to continue to get larger and larger. And as we have shared, within the next 10 years, it'll be over $100 million. And it's just going to continue to go until we come up with a community solution to slowly start addressing these facility maintenance items that are directly tied to the facilities that this community supported to build at some juncture over their life. Now, as you also know, a third of our buildings are over 30 years old, so they're on their second half of their lifespan, and so there's more things that just keep breaking and failing. We are constantly having heating and cooling issues in all of our schools, and you don't have to look far for many examples. We are finally having our snow melt and have our spring sports, kind of starting up, and we've got tennis courts in our high schools that, have crevices in the tennis courts, and you can't even hardly play. But long story short, we recognize that with our community and having a conversation about 2 levies this past levy series cycle, if you will, this last levy season for the last 6 months, there was just too many conversations and not enough specific focus. And so we believe that it's probably best to put the plant facility levy on hold at this time and just focus on the renewal of the major, or the M&O levy, the supplemental levy, so that we can make sure that we keep that 25% funding for our students. So with that, I would like to invite up a couple members of my team. We'd like to have our finance director come up, as well as our HR director, and we want to walk through a few specific spreadsheets and show you the cuts and where we would end up being as we continue to share out our information. So Shannon, you want to come on up?
All right. Good evening, Chair Smith and trustees. I'm going to start off the conversation, and Eric Davis, our HR director, is going to finish it. So really, when we're talking about the levy for next year, we need to take into account a couple things. So I'm going to run it through with you. So here's, let me try to get this a little bigger. Okay, so what you're looking at is the impacts of having no levy, no supplemental levy on the books, and then having the 25 million levy on the books. You see our first line right here is our levy increase or decrease. With no levy, we are reducing our levy dollars by 20 million. With a $25 million levy, we are getting $5 million extra. Our second line right here, these are possible state revenue increases. So JFAC, our Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, so the legislators at the state that determine the education budget, and then the House and Senate vote on it. They did a couple big items for next year. One is they are increasing each certified career ladder cell by $6,359. So that's teacher pay. They are increasing classified, the average salary that we're paid from $38,000 to $38,000 from $24,000. So that's, if you take an hourly rate, it's $18.65 instead of $12 or $12. So those are the big 2 impacts, and they are increasing discretionary a little bit for health insurance. Those are great things, but there's one huge negative impact in state revenues for next year. We most likely will be going back to average daily attendance funding. So ADA, we have about a 7% absence rate right now. It has gone up a little bit. So instead of being funded off of enrollment, that now it's reduced by 7% and going to ADA. So I've calculated, now this is very rough, it hasn't been approved, the education budget yet, but we would have probably had more than close to about $9 million in additional state revenue, but it's looking about $5 million. So big impact. Great things happening, but with ADA, a huge loss. Okay, so this third line is our current general fund working deficit. Now, I've heard a lot in the past weeks that we have a $21 million surplus, and I wish that was the case. That'd be awesome, right? I think I'm trying to decipher where some people were getting that number. And if you look on our adopted budget, that's online. All our funds are online in our independent financial audit and also our adopted budget, approved by the State Department of Education as well and reviewed by auditors. There is an ending fund balance of almost 21 million. It's really important. Governmental accounting is pretty complicated. When we're talking about the levy, we are talking about our general fund operations. As a governmental agency, we also have a lot of different separate restricted funds. So out of that $21 million ending fund balance, $7 million is from our bond fund to pay down principal and interest. That is a huge portion, right? $5 million is in our capital facilities fund for capital facilities. We were able to identify some ESSER surplus and restrict that for deferred maintenance, because we've got a child nutrition fund that can only be used for child nutrition services. We have a School Plus Enterprise Fund for our before and after school daycare. So it's really important. I highly recommend whoever is interested in learning about our financials to attend the budget hearings. We go through all the funds, to review online all the funds. You can email me and you can do a public records request to get more information. But we have a $2.5 million working deficit right now, and that does need to be addressed. All right, so we do need to take care of that deficit. If we were to increase teacher pay by the $6,359 that the state essentially wants to do with funding, that would cost the district $4.7 million. We're only getting about $1.6 million in state revenue to do that. If we want to continue our goal of increasing the starting pay of classified to $15, that's going to cost $2.8 million to the district. Or sorry, $2.8 million. Good news is that the state is funding us about $2.2 million. So not a huge difference that we would have to cover. Now we get into administration. The state has no new revenue for administration, but the moment we increase our highest teacher columns by $6,359, Eric and I were taking a look. Now they're getting paid $10 more per day than an assistant principal. So that needs to be addressed. That leaves us with, if we have no million, adding up all the new expenditures and then the new state revenue, we're at a deficit of $25.5 million. That means we need to cut $25.5 million. If the levy were to pass and we went for $25 million, we would have a small deficit, but we could identify cuts to balance the budget. That is a doable amount. So I am going to pass it to Eric Davis, our HR director, to go over how we get to $25.5 million in cuts. Do you have any questions for me before?
Could you repeat what you said about the $10 less per principal? I think I tuned out.
Yeah, so if you took a teacher kind of on the farthest column with some experience, they would be making now, with that $6,000 increase, $10 more per day than an assistant principal for their daily rate. Teachers. Yeah. Okay.
Shannon, just real quick, sorry, before you go.
Yeah.
On the state appropriations there, I just want to make sure I understood you correctly there. So I understand these are estimates.
Estimates, yep.
But I want to make sure I heard you that if the state were to stay on funding us on enrollment, like they have the last, I believe, 3 years now,
Yep.
we've been on enrollment, it'd be about $9 million in
Yep.
new state revenue.
Yeah.
But because they're going back to ADA, it'll be about $5 million.
Correct.
Okay.
Is it a done deal on going back to ADA?
Well, it's not in any type of motion from JFAC. Kind of everything that Sean and I have been hearing is plan on ADA, but the State Board of Education could do another temporary rule. But again, another temporary rule, and we would, if we make decisions on a temporary rule, we could be in the same boat that we're currently in. All right.
Good afternoon, Board Chair Smith and trustees. I wish I could tell you it was an honor to be here right now. But as the Human Resources Director for a district that employs 1,371 people, the last week we've been in a really dark place as we've tried to figure out what we would do to balance the budget if we were $25 million short. And it's my position that I get to share with you the cuts that we have come up with so far that would make us balance without the levy. I think.
Just hit on that second tab.
All right, we're going to start at the top, at the district office. We have identified district office and operating staff. We've identified 28 employees that we would cut. It includes members of the cabinet and the executive level leadership, staff members, the mental health department at all, and that would save us about $2.3 million at the district office level. In terms of non-personnel costs, the district office and operating department budgets, which are non-payroll, we would cut approximately $2.5 million there, which would include things such as curriculum and a couple of other programs. We, of course, would be forced to cut all athletics and extracurricular staffing, and that'd save us about $1.2 million. It includes 265 different coaching stipends, music stipends, yearbook stipends, etc., as well as 3 athletic directors, 2 from the high school level and 1 from the middle school level. We would have to cut also with athletics. There would be no need to have state competition travel any longer, which would save us approximately $300,000 in the budget. We have to take a serious look at KTAC and our participation with KTAC. Right now, our share is about $600,000 at KTAC. We would lose all of our law enforcement officers, which right now are 9 SROs, for a total of $580,000, and 4 campus security officers, as well as our safety and security coordinator for another $250,000. Potentially, in order to get to the level of cuts that we need, we could close 2 elementary schools. That would include 25 employees per school. Elementary staffing, by changing our staffing ratios. Currently, our K-1 classes are 23 students. Our 2-3 classes are 26 students. I'll come back to that. And our 4-5 classes are 30 students. We would change those ratios to 30, 32, and 35 at the elementary level, and that would save us 114 certified staff over the elementary schools. We would also go to half-day kindergarten. We would have to look at that. That would save us 16 kindergarten teachers at about $1.2 million. And Ed, before I go any further, let me remind you and everybody that's within the sound of my voice, none of these suggestions are good for kids or good for the district. Not one of them. And we take no pleasure up here being the one that gets to speak these out. But understand that's where we are without the $25 million. Middle school staffing, we would move our student-teacher ratio to 1 to 26. Currently, it's about 1 to 22. And what would happen is we would save about 32 positions at the middle school level. At the high school level, we would change currently, we are in the top 10 in the state of Idaho in student-teacher ratio at our high schools, at about 1 to 20. That would have to change to about 1 to 30. And that would save us 39 certified staff at the high school. Now, one of the things that jumps out to me as we look at these numbers is the big number of elementary school teachers that we're losing. It is an average of 11.8 people per building. At the middle school level, it's an average of 10.5 people per building. And at the high school level, it is an average of 13 people per building. And it is all relatively close to being racial Ratio? Equal. Ratio equal. But it is more expensive to educate at the secondary level than the elementary level because the classes are self-contained. There are building budgets that every building has. We would cut those in half and save $612 million. And we would cut all librarians and library managers, 16 more employees for another $670 million. $670,000. The numbers are all big. That would get us about 24 million in cuts when everything's said and done.
About 23.
About 23.
Right there. We're still too short. 2.5.
Still shorter than where we need to be, and those cuts are pretty deep. And that's what I have. I will stand for questions.
One of the things that I've heard as I've talked with Dr. Hawker recently just about those cuts is maybe you could speak a little bit about how you came up with that list. I know that as we've discussed, it's really the difference between what the funding exactly that we get and that we're by law required to provide from the state and what we have built over time through the Coeur d'Alene community.
And that's
speak
pretty
to that?
accurate. We started with the things that you would call, quote unquote, if there is such a thing, non-essentials. Then we went to what would it look like if we tightened our belt? Then we went to what does it look like if we changed our class sizes? Then we went to what does it look like if we consolidate buildings? In the end, when you're educating 10,000 students, there's a limit to how far back you can go. And so we started cutting programs like professional development, like K-3 Lit, like remediation funds that we'd set aside for kids. We went and we had to go after ALP teachers. All the ALP teachers are a part of this process as well. But we had to look at what each building could do on kind of a bare bones minimum. We have taken out of the elementary number, every elementary school goes to only a half-time assistant principal instead of a full-time assistant principal. We worked it as hard as we could to get where we feel like they could operate, but that would be the bare minimum. While we continue to meet all state requirements in terms of what we're teaching and how we house our students per fire code, right? There's a limit to how many buildings we could combine because we're pretty full on a lot of them as it is. So we couldn't combine a high school. We couldn't combine a middle school. So those were the tough decisions that we had to make. And as Shannon and I were working through each and every one of these, there were very few that we would say are not essential, and yet they had to make the list. And in the end, it's 311 employees out of 1,371. It's about 23% of our work staff. So you could see that at 23%, we were taking more from as many other areas to help drive that down as far as we could, instead of making it a straight 25 for 25. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Maybe since you're in charge of HR, could you define one of the questions that we've received a number of questions about is admin staff and what that means for a district? Because could you define that? Because oftentimes we hear the comment, the district office has too many staff. What does that mean, and how would you answer that if someone asked you that question?
It's a good question. I think when you come into an organization and you look at the things that have to happen for an organization of our size to operate, you have to take that into consideration, right? So if you start with the basic thing, HR is kind of necessary because you got to hire people to have an organization. Payroll, and finance are important because we've got to manage that money. IT in today's community and culture and society is essential because of so much that we're doing technology-wise. Operations, where you're dealing with 20-plus buildings. You're dealing with custodial, grounds, and maintenance personnel. Maintenance on things that we can't keep up with because we don't have enough maintenance people. You look at some of the areas that in today's society and culture and climate, mental health is so important, and yet that's one of the decisions we've had to make because it was in and identified as part of a levy at one point in time. Federal programs. You have to have federal programs and assessment. You can't have a school district where funds come in or assessments have to occur and you don't manage those. I think as you look at the organizational structure and you compare it to any other private organization of this size and girth, you are running a really lean district. Even when you go down and you look at all the rest of the support staff that are underneath it, we only have, 79 people that are in any way tied to the district office administration. That's all we have. And that includes everybody who's paying the bills, receiving the money, making sure we're hiring and giving benefits, making sure we have computers on everybody's desk, making sure that the health and welfare of our students are good, and so many more that as I stand right here now and go blank, that I can't really enumerate. But it's always easy to say that you're top heavy. First thing that anybody says, until you realize the functions and the jobs that have to be accomplished. When you've got 1,371 employees and 10,000 plus students at 20 plus buildings across X amount of square miles. This is a big deal. It's a big place. And to only have the number of administrators that we do have, and I will tell you that if you want to take that administration number and go down a level and start looking at the building level, to have buildings of over 600 kids with a principal and an assistant principal is going to be incredibly difficult. To have high schools with a principal and 2 assistant principals with 1,600 kids, we're not overstaffed there either when we have 1 in 3. So it's an easy target, but really, even if you took out all administration, you're still not making up the gap of 2.2 million if you let everybody in the district office go. Then you'd have some unhappy people because they couldn't get paid. So, did that answer your question? Not
did.
scientific, but.
No, thank you.
Well, thank you for your time.
Okay, now we're going to take a look at what updated tax rates will look like with the recommendation of 25 million for 2 years, no SPFL. It's now $1.15 per 1,000. It was $1.33 at our last election. So again, it is a jump from 96 cents, but we're kind of at all-time low right now. But definitely less than all of the prior years. Okay, this is important to show you. These are the top 20th largest districts in Idaho. Currently, the statewide average of a tax rate per thousand is $1.85. So we're under the statewide average. If you're looking at all schools that levy, from largest to smallest tax rate, we're 82nd on the list. And if you're looking at CDA compared to the 20th largest school districts, we're the third smallest. We are just ahead of Post Falls, and I'm going to butcher it. How do you say it? Oneida? Oneida. So we're here right now. If we were at $1.15, that would just put us one more over in between Meridian and Lakeland. Okay, so an important thing to look at is a tax bill example. What we're going to look at is a median priced home in Coeur d'Alene. You can go on Zillow, type in Coeur d'Alene median home value, and go to each January month for 2021, 2022, and 2023, and you'll get the median priced home. All right, so comparing 2021, 2022, and 2023, if we were at $1.15 per thousand, that would jump up the property tax portion of this assessed value, this home, to $470.38. So a $109 increase from the prior year, or $9.10 per month. Take into note that the assessed value did go up. So it's important that this increase would be based off of just an increase in the assessed value and an increase from a $20 to $25 million supplemental levy. I'll show you just that specific increase for the supplemental levy. All right, so here's a column per 100,000, and here was that medium priced home on that prior slide. In the current year, so our fiscal year 2023 or tax year 2022, our supplemental levy tax rate right now is $76.17 per 100,000. So $312 per year for our supplemental levy for that median home. That should be FY24, sorry. So if the supplemental levy were to go from 20 to 25 million, that per $100,000 rate would now jump to $95.21, so about a little more than $19. So now you're at $389.43 that you're paying for the supplemental levy. How that breaks down, that $5 million increase in that supplemental levy would cost $78 per year, or about $6.50 per month. So that $78, that's in that 109. It's not an add-on. So $79 of the increase is for that supplemental levy, that 20 to 25, and the remaining 30 is just because that assessed value, the $30 is the assessed value going up by a little bit. So I encourage all of you to look up your property tax bill, and you can use these figures to calculate what the increase to your school tax property bill would be.
Shannon,
Yep.
why do we use the current value of homes to estimate the tax rate?
Because we have to use the current value of the assessed value.
Because it's the known value, correct?
It's the known value, yeah. But this median home value is as of January 2023, which is what the assessed value, that's what you'd be taxed on, that January 2023 assessed value.
And if home values go up, what happens to that levy rate?
Well, it kind of depends. If your assessed value goes up, the amount you pay will increase. It also depends on the assessed value, and as our entire district assessed value and new construction. So if we're not increasing the levy and values continue to go up, the levy rate reduces. So you have to factor in the levy rate will reduce if we're not increasing the levy at all and the assessed value is going up. But you need to take a look at your individual assessed value to see if you might actually reduce your tax, if you kind of are staying around the same, or if your assessed value went got really high, then you're going to pay more in tax. It's an individual basis. So that's why that levy calculator is so important for the individual person, and taking a look at your specific tax bill. All right, so I'm going to bring it back to Sean for questions.
All right, so just to bring this into conclusion, as you could see on that last slide right here, although both the plant facility levy and the supplemental levy are both very important to the school district, we think we need to be even more focused and just more simplistic if we were to move forward and just share with our community so that they can specifically see an average home is looking at about $6.50 a month if they want to support the extra $5 million on the supplemental levy and vote for approval of the $25 million levy. Without the $25 million levy, we go back to the previous slides and share with you the drastic cuts that will need to take place across the entire district. So that's all we have for PowerPoints. We didn't want to give you death by PowerPoint tonight. We know many people have seen a lot, but we wanted to share with you our justification and our recommendation for the board to approve going back out to our community to renew the existing 2-year supplemental levy for an additional 2 years. Don't add on the perpetuity, but leave the amount the same at 25. And then for this time around, go ahead and drop off the plant facility levy request, and we will reconvene and bring that back at a future date. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hawker. Trustees?
I have a question I think would be better directed at Shannon. I know that we have a land acquisition fund.
Yep.
And I'm just curious to know how much that is, and if our enrollment numbers continue to drop, would that be something that we can use to be able to fill the gap for
Yeah, so it's Fund 430, there's a little less than 5 million in there. The board did commit those funds in a resolution. So in order to move those to the general fund, the board would have to do another resolution to uncommit those funds and move them back into the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I have some data of my own that I've been contemplating, but unfortunately I don't have any slides for you, so you'll have to listen real carefully. So like all of you, this week has been a tough week, and I have spent a lot of time reflecting as to why our levies failed. I believe perpetuity was one of the big reasons, but it's not the sole reason. Last week at our board meeting, we heard a lot of concerns from the community, and we've been hearing these things for a while. So I think when we look at when things don't go the way we want them to, we need to look inside instead of just pointing the finger that a third-party group affected us or some other third-party entity is the reason. It's important that we reflect and figure out what role we played in this as well. So I like data. I think it's important to see things. And one of the things I saw was a trend that we've been seeing for roughly 6 years now. So in 2017, we ran a levy, and it passed with 79%. And granted, like Dr. Hawker said, our number from this last levy was the highest we've had turned out, but that passed with just over 7,000 votes. 2 years later, in 2019, we passed another levy with 70%, so that was a 9% decrease, and that passed with 6,100 people. 2 years later after that, the levy passed with 60%, so we dropped another 10% of support, and that one passed with a few more people, 9,700 people. Then this last levy that we had failed with 49%, so we dropped 11% support from the one we had 2 years ago. Now, I heard it said that the 2021 levy could have been a fluke because we were just coming out of COVID and there was a lot going on. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And I think data numbers are important because they're not subjective. They're not opinions, they're facts. So what we need to ask ourselves is, why are we losing 10% every 2 years in our support? And if we don't address some of the concerns that our community has about our public schools, are we going to drop another 10%? Are we going to drop 10% in May? Are we going to drop 10% 2 years from now? I want our levies to pass. This is a grim picture that we're looking at, but I also want our community's concerns addressed as well. So I think it's important that we do some real reflection and figure out how we can make things better. We can do better. We have a lot of talented people in this district, but we have to do better, and we have to figure out how to reach across the aisle and not only say it's the people we agree with we're going to work with and the other ones we're not going to work with. That's what I've learned this week as I've reflected, and I hope you all will do that too. We're never going to get any place divided. So if we want to do better for everyone, our kids, our teachers, our community, we have to work together. So that's it for now.
I ended up writing a statement because there have been so many concerns brought to our attention over the last few weeks, the weeks leading up to the levy, as well as since the failure of the levies. And I really think that we need to take the time to address the lack of trust between our community and our district. We all need to understand that if the loss of the levy were solely due to the ask for perpetuity, then our SPFL would have passed. If the acts of outside parties were to blame, then Lakeland school districts would have passed with both of their levies with the other outside support. Our administration and board needs to think about what our community, for our administration and board to think that our community is so easily influenced by the thoughts and actions of others rather than being capable of deciphering information for themselves does not show a high regard for the intelligence of our community. There were derogatory, insensitive, and inflammatory comments made by Dr. Hawker, our vice chair and a principal in our district, to significant concerns of parents being dismissed, to blatant deception and lack of accountability. It isn't hard to understand why there is a lack of trust and confidence. Administration and the board have continually failed to acknowledge or validate concerns brought to them by our community, such as lack of rigor in curriculum, safety of restrooms, locker rooms, questionable content in curriculum and books, and truthfulness. This has resulted in a significant erosion of trust between the community and the district. Just a few examples of those would be, recently we were looking at, there were several books brought to our attention that were questionable within our libraries. And those are questions that I've been asking for quite a while, is how can we most easily access a database that has all of our books in our libraries? And until a very diligent parent found that there was a way through Destiny Discover to see all of those books available, I was unaware of that, and I've been asking these questions for quite a while. It was suggested that it would be a great way to boost parent confidence in the district before the levy if we were to address that and make a statement that we would root out and do the best that we could to identify those books. Instead, it was said that it would be addressed after the levy due to the complexity of going through all of our classroom libraries. Regardless of agreement or disagreement with each other, the public or those opposing the passage of the levies, it's never okay to make derogatory, inflammatory statements or participate in name-calling. At such a sensitive time before the election, comments and claims against the levies were called un-American and disgusting, causing more division between the community and the district. Many community members questioned those comments and made it clear that these statements would only succeed in further alienating the public that we so desperately needed support from. A few weeks ago, our transgender guidelines approved by the board in 2014 were brought to the attention of the entire board and Dr. Hawker. At that time, myself and many in the community suggested that we follow the request of making a commitment as a board that we would actively be working on policy to address these guidelines and give clear identification or clear direction. Many, including myself, insisted that this would help build trust within our community, therefore increasing the chances of the success of our levies. I was told that it would be addressed after the levy. Since the revelation of the transgender guidelines, there was an incident with a transgender student using the girls' bathroom at Coeur d'Alene High School just recently, and this was discussed at length at our March 13 meeting. At the meeting, Vice Chair Morrisroe specifically asked Dr. Hawker to confirm the interpretation of those guidelines and how such instances would be handled in the future. Dr. Hawker confirmed at that time that transgender students would be required to either use the bathroom that corresponds with their biological sex, or reasonable accommodations would be made for the transgender student. In an email just days later, Dr. Hawker states that those guidelines are clear that a transgender student should not be required to use a restroom that conflicts with the student's gender identity. This statement is in contradiction to the statements made on March 13th. There, if you'd like to take a look, I do have the meeting queued up to that point as well so that we can listen to Dr. Hawker's words directly. Also concerning those transgender guidelines, Dr. Hawker said, and I quote, "Myself and my administration were unaware of these guidelines until recently." This is stated on the video from our last meeting as well. However, on March 15th, the board received an email from a guardian in the district revealing an email chain with Dr. Hawker and Mr. Morrisroe concerning these very transgender guidelines being discussed as far back as October of 2021 and again in January of 2023. I have those emails and dates if you would like them. It appears to be blatant deception on the part of some. Recently, I made a comment in the regard that I felt like I should be recording conversations. This is because I question whether I can trust that someone's word will be honored and that the truth will not be twisted. With our superintendent as a trustee, if I don't have trust in you, why would the community have any more trust in that regard? The support of our district levies has continued to drop, as Leslie had said, by 10% each time without perpetuity being a factor. All the while, our voter turnout has almost tripled. This levy continued to follow that trend, and there are many reasons. The fact is that there's many reasons for the failure of our levies, and lack of trust is significant. I would really like to see an action plan put forth by the board to bridge that gap, or I am afraid that we will once more fail another levy. I know that our teachers and students deserve a new levy to be put forth. I'm in favor of putting forth a new levy to our community in a lesser amount at the 2-year with no perpetuity. And it is my sincere belief that the only way that this levy will pass is if the board and superintendent can commit to creating an action plan addressing the trust issues in our community. And one of those steps should be the Budget Oversight Committee made up of many members of our community, as well as consideration of an additional outside financial audit to more closely scrutinize where the district could be saving money.
Is there any questions for Trustee Anderton? I guess I just want to clarify, though, as far as the library books go, the process is being followed according to board policy at this moment. Could we clarify that?
Now it is, yes, absolutely. The process is being followed and.
But it was being followed even prior to the levy.
Yes.
So prior to the levy, even though it wasn't completely resolved prior to the levy, but the process was put in place to look at library books and to go through that process prior to the levy. It wasn't just pushed off because of the levy. It was started prior to the levy, and we've begun reviewing all of the library books that are in question or that people have comments or concerns about. That process was started and is in process right now. Is that correct?
Now that the books have been revealed, yes, that process was started just before the levy. I did also ask at that point, though, that we make sure that the community was notified of the action that we were taking moving forward on those books. And that
Right.
was,
And we have committed as a board to reviewing the transgender policy and to taking up that work. That date is set. I mean, we're doing that April 11th, reviewing all of that work. This is not something that this board is pushing off.
it was something that I believe the board and Dr. Hawker have been pushing off since before the levy time came about, when the transgender guidelines were first brought to the board's attention.
Because the state is reflecting and doing that work right now.
We were asked by the community to go ahead and address that at that point in time,
Right.
though, and I did
And
want to
we
bring
are
up that conversation
addressing
at
it,
that point in time.
and we've said that we want to wait until the state finishes their work, because we do value that work and want to be reflective, correct?
That was said at the 13th, at the May 13th, March 13th meeting, yes.
Thanks. Other questions for Dr. Hawker?
I guess I'll ask a question. So like Ally mentioned, there is a distrust. Okay, whether we like that or not, it's a fact. We have a distrust. So I do like the idea of coming up with a way, if we're going to be asking for money again, assuring the community that we value their input and that we are going to work hard to make sure that we figure out a way to alleviate some of that distrust. So whether that's an action plan, that sounds like a good idea to me. I like that. It's always good to have a plan, but we need the community. We need you. We need all of you because they're the ones that pay for our schools. So we want them to value our schools. We want our teachers valued. We want our students valued. I hear all the time that teachers don't feel valued by the community, but we want to. And it also kind of made me sad at the beginning of the meeting that just because someone votes no on this, and I got tons of email and I've been stopped all over the place. Yes, perpetuity was a scare for many. They didn't like that. But, I lost my train of thought. We have to work together. We can't always be pointing the finger at what we perceive as the other side. And we have to fix the trust issue, or we're never going to pass levies. And we want to pass levies. We need them. That was very clear from Shannon and Dr. Hager's presentation, so we have to do better. I'm committed to doing that, and I hope you all are too.
Well, Ms. Bierke, I certainly appreciate the idea of not pointing the finger, of moving forward together, of working together, and doing the best for our district. I'll say, Wednesday was a tough day for our community, I think, and for me personally. I was in a few of our buildings, and it was not pretty. I was at one of our high schools that had 12 teachers ask for letters of recommendation on Wednesday. And that's a scary thought. That list up there, the cut list, is devastating for our community and for our school district as we know it. I was reflecting here on the mental health cuts, and 5 years ago, tomorrow, I was in a math curriculum meeting over at the district office with Dr. Nelson, and we got a call about Principal Troy Schuler taking his life. And that's the toughest day I've had in this district, I can tell you that. And I remember it every year. And that was followed up with a few students that took their lives in the coming weeks, and a former coach. And I can't imagine sending my kids to these schools without mental health supports. I can't imagine sending my kids to school without SROs, or without sports and extracurricular activities, without teachers and counselors, administrators. It's not the school or the district I want my kids in. And I've done a lot of soul searching. And yeah, perpetuity, it didn't work. I agree with Dr. Hawker. I think it was worth the ask. And we said when we met, all we can do is ask and let the public tell us what they think. And they have. And we've accepted that. But I can't accept doing nothing. We owe it to our students, we owe it to our community to rerun something on a 2-year ask. And I think by the evidence, it's pretty clear what that something should be.
How about apology? The committee member who insulted?
Shh, please.
I'm a similar place as Trustee Morris-Rowe. I, along with many members of our community, didn't sleep Tuesday night. Unfortunately, I refreshed right on my way to bed. I should have waited till the morning. But because I know the impact this has on our students. I know the impact it has on our staff. I know the impact it has on our community. I know the impact it has on our businesses. So I am with Trustee Morris-Rowe. I think we need to try. I hope that some in our community will be reassured that We have followed our board policies. A community member has come forward with a list of books they'd like reviewed, and we are following our policy and working on that review now. To my knowledge, that was the first time we had a community member with specific list of books that are in our library that they wanted reviewed. And we have scheduled April 11th to talk about a bathroom policy. So I feel like that's a reasonably good action plan at some of these concerns. And I think we have to try. Our students and our staff and our community need us to try and keep the school programs that we have, because our students do well. And that's really my primary question. What do our students need? And I know there's some that say our schools are failing. I disagree. We had a couple schools in the top 10 in the state in the recent rankings released. Our schools we can always improve, and I think we should. But cutting $25 million from our budget is not a route to improving our schools. So that's where I am.
For me, it's not an option to not do anything. I've been, just like my fellow trustees, it's been a horrible week. Just to think of what our schools could look like, the lives of our students, our teachers, our parents, our families, and the impact of the loss of this levy will be felt in Coeur d'Alene for years to come. It's more than just a school issue, it's a full community issue. There's been the impact of lack of trust. There's the impact of misinformation. There's the lack of some of us just coming together and moving forward together to support each other, and we can all do better, myself included. Because as we've been saying as a community and as teachers, we are better together as we move forward. I would like to, one of the data points that I've looked at recently has just been our leadership over the last 8 years. We've had 4 different superintendents during that time. And anytime a large organization such as ours that is about people has a new leader in there, it takes time and energy to get behind the mission, vision, and the values of that organization. And it just doesn't happen overnight. And I believe in Dr. Hawker, and I want to publicly state that because I've read the emails, the names, all the things that have been out there. And I, for one, am thankful right now for his leadership, that he's chosen to invest in this district and this community and wants to be there. And I feel a need to say that because to get behind and to do exactly what some of your your signs say, I want to turn and continue to work on increasing our school scores. But we can't do that until we've got leadership in place that takes longer than just 2 years. If leadership turns over every 2 years, we can't do that. Believe that Dr. Hawker has that vision for our school and our community and wants to get our test scores, wants to get to know our community better, and I'm thankful that he has invested in this space. That being said, I can't not do anything, and I believe in the recommendation that you've laid forth for us today. So,
Everybody keeps saying that we think we should do something. I don't think that was a question, was it? I mean, I think we're all saying we need to do something. It's what we want to do. We're going to turn around, and I will tell you, I've also heard from a lot of people that said no means no. I don't want to give any more. So if the goal is to get this levy passed, which I assume it is, we all want that, then perhaps we might want to think about asking a little less to show that we hear you, we're going to do better, but we need this because we need this for our schools. So I would be comfortable asking for 20 and staying at 20. And I would fully support that. So a suggestion.
Trustee Smith, if I may, and members of the board, appreciate that comment. I know you're wrapped on time, and we need to stay here as long as possible to get this resolved. I think it's imperative that all 5 board members are on the exact same page when you conclude this meeting. If indeed it's the wishes of the board to drop down to $20 million, I would ask that the board today identify the $5 million that's coming off that list.
So Trustee Berkey, where would you like to go with that?
And I'm not going to pick something today, but there is places we probably could trim. We do have money coming from the state. I don't know what it's going to be. As Shannon said, it's an estimate, but everyone is struggling with inflation now, and they're in the same boat as we are. We're all struggling with all the extra costs, and we're asking for a 25% increase from our previous levy.
Trustee Smith, if I may too, I just want to reiterate, because I know this is going to be a continued conversation we're going to have in our community. As Shannon shared with you on a previous slide, yes, the state, thank goodness, they're going to give us some money. And just like they seem to always do, even though I've only been here for 2 years, they play a shell game and they take it away. And that is what you get to see right there. They're going to give us $5 million. They could have given us $10 million, but they don't want to fund us on membership. They want to fund us on attendance. And so for every school in the state that's never going to have 100% of their students in the seat every single day of a school year, they're always going to end up less. Our less takes us down to about 93%, which drops us down to about that $5 million. But with that extra $5 million comes expectations. No, I wouldn't even say expectations, requirements that you pass on all that money through those different categories. The state is giving every teacher, and rightfully so, $6,359. You'll be required to give that to step one teachers in the cell. To do that's going to cost you $4.7 million. So even though the state's given us more money, we're going backwards. You can see right there on that presentation, with no $20 million levy, we're $25.5 million in the hole. So I just want to make sure it's abundantly clear in our community, getting this extra money from the state, great, awesome. I wish they'd quit taking other monies away that you don't get to see up here, because it does not benefit Coeur d'Alene School District or the vast majority of any school districts. I know the Plummer-Worley School District down the road has 80% attendance on most given days. So they're looking at a 20% loss of funding, all because the state wants to give this, and because they're given this, they want to cut back and switch to an ADA. And unfortunately, we have tried until we're blue in the face to get our legislators to fix that, and our state board has an opportunity to always do perhaps a rule each year, but they've also been threatened by other legislators that if they do this, the other legislators are going to do this other thing, and this whole political crap that we get involved in schools becomes a mess. And so ultimately speaking, there we are. If we want to cut even $1 million, I need to know where you want that $1 million cut, and we can't just wait and figure out how to do that in the next couple of months. This is the hiring season for all of our staff. This is the time we enter into contracts to replace a quarter of our technology, 20% of our computers each and every year, and we no longer can do any of that for at least the next 6 weeks until the next levy we're potentially, assuming if you want to go to the community and ask for it, we can't even commit to any of that stuff until that date. So I just want to make sure you as trustees are very well aware of that specific scenario. Cutting even $1 million is going to be extremely difficult, because where on that list that we had up on the screen do you want to cut $1 million? What program goes away if you don't want? Let me jump back over there to that specific slide. Oh wait, I think Seth just did it for me. Thanks, Seth. So you can see, you want to scroll that up, Seth, for me just a little bit? Perfect. So there's your list. So, I have to say that I think our community expects our school resource officers. Can't cut that. I think our community, the K-Tech thing is actually a good deal for us. We only pay half of the expenses for K-Tech because the other two school districts pay the other equivalent half. However, because it's an elective and it's not required, it became part of the cut list. All the librarians, I am just telling you as your superintendent, I cannot find in anywhere in there to cut $1 million. Can we try to absorb some positions and absorb as I showed you on the other slide, with the $25 million levy, we're still $500,000 short of making it work. Can we try to make that work? I can commit to you today that we'll have no choice, but I can make that work. But you just need to be aware, we have not gone to our community and asked for an increase for 4 years. Our $20 million that you had on the books in 2019 is worth $16 million today. Where's that $4 million gone? It's gone from all kinds of cuts in everything that we've done across the district since that time. We are now cut down to the bone. There is no fat. There is no extra staff anywhere. I'm just trying to make sure you see that specific picture. There's not $500,000. There's not $300,000. The least expensive thing on that entire list is our campus security officers. And those campus security officers are filling a gap from our SROs because we don't have enough SROs to cover all of our campuses. And I think we would all agree in today's day and age, safety and security for our kids has got to be our number one priority. So I just want you to know, I can't cut $1 million out of that without cutting a significant something out of this budget. And what I need is to be able to tell our employees what their future may or may not hold. If the board chooses to renew a $25 million ask, there's at least a little hope in their eyes for the next 6 weeks until the next election levy. And I hope that our community is empowered to go vote after we continue to spend the next 6 weeks showing them the seriousness of what will happen if the levy fails.
For me, I think a couple things about that, if we're going with a reduced amount, and I hear what you're saying. I've thought about that. I've thought about, well, this is what the community voted, so let's give them what they asked for, right? But I can't do that. I can't sleep at night with that. And maybe that's what happens in May, and maybe I just don't sleep at night. I don't know. But I can't give up on that, I guess. Because without all those things, we're in trouble as a community. The impact on the value of your homes will be 100 times greater than any tax you will ever pay. Home values will drop quickly if that is our schools. And, we don't want that. If we waited a year, we will lose 400 teachers. I know it says 318 total people, 120 teachers. 400 will leave this district. I can guarantee you, because they are not going to want to work here in that situation. And it will.
All sorts of clapping. Doesn't matter.
What, folks, I appreciate the applause. We've got 15 minutes to wrap this meeting up, so thank you. But let's just keep the meeting going. To recover from even a year with no levy would take 10 years, I believe, 5 years at least. And, I've got a fifth grader, my youngest kid. She's going to be long gone in 10 years, right? Hopefully. So, I don't know. She's a wild one. But, we can't wait 10 years. We can't wait 1 year. And so, I appreciate it. We've got to do something. I hear what you're saying. I'm the same way. Can we pull it back some? We have. I agree with not going after the facilities. We all know the facility work needs to be done. We're band-aiding things every day. Coeur d'Alene High has been without heat for half the year, right? We've used some ESSER funds, and we're going to handle that this summer. But that's just one school. There's more beyond that need work. But that's failed twice, and I think we've got to take a break on the facilities sides of things. That is a reduction. That's a $5 million a year reduction from what we asked for last week. It's half of the tax increase that we would have had if both measures would have passed last week. So I do think we're showing some restraint. I hear what you're saying. Personally, I'd rather us go at 25 and then over the coming months look to tighten up wherever we can to do some more towards maintenance, deferred maintenance, than go at 20 and be in a bigger hole and just have our deferred maintenance get worse, because that's what's going to happen, because we can push that stuff off. we're not going to push classroom things off. So that I'd feel much better about that.
I'd just like to ask the question if it would be considered to do the 22.5, 22.5 million, and then the board consider using that land acquisition fund to fill the gaps for the next 2 years.
I'm real nervous about that because we need to acquire land. I mean, if that development that we hopefully are purchasing land in comes to fruition, we need land there. There'll be all those new homes. And, you know, I remember a few years ago, I mean, for several years, our district's been in a position where we didn't have land and we didn't have money to buy land and we clearly needed new schools. And so, you know, Nexa, we ended up buying from a couple property owners and getting a lot that wasn't quite big enough. And I'm really not comfortable with using that land acquisition money to backfill a deficit, because I think forward thinking, we need the ability to acquire land.
Trustee Smith, if I may also, not to beat a dead horse, but I just want to refresh my memory. I do believe back in October or November when you as board decided what to do, my recollection is that all 5 board members were in support of a $25 million supplemental levy. I believe that a couple trustees were not in favor of the perpetuity piece. So we showed back then, we're showing today the real need of that $25 million without having any drastic cuts to any of these various programs. It would certainly be my ask that the trustees return back to what they initially had said back in October, that they would support the $25 million levy without the perpetuity, and we go to work with our community to have this conversation every 2 years.
I think one thing to consider there, I guess, with if we're doing less and we're not identifying, you know, where we're going to make the cuts yet, is, you know, we run the risk of approving something and then cutting something, and someone saying, well, geez, if I knew you were going to pull all-day kindergarten back to half-day, I wouldn't have supported the levy, or, you know, that's what got me excited, or the security officers, or, you know, whatever it is. And I'm sure, you know, $2.5 million, you're not saying cut a full line item, right? We're talking a little bit here and a little bit there. But you can only get so deep in the bone, right? Before, you know, there's just not that much there. And I wish there was. I just worry about that. And based on Shannon's projections from the state revenue, I think $2.5 million would be difficult when we're in a $2 million hole already.
And if I remember correctly, those cuts didn't equal 25, right? They were already 2.5 shy.
That's correct. You can see with all of those cuts,
it is 25.
you're still $368,000 short.
Okay, it was 25.
Of, you need some more. You need more cuts to get that red line that says surplus back to zero.
Yeah, okay. But I was remembering a different slide. Never mind.
Okay.
I do think that there has been some interesting ideas that have come forth from some of the online letters that we've received about ways to look at tightening pieces of our budget. But I think that that's work that we can continue to do, that we can commit to today, maybe looking at some of those, putting together, you know, plans, those types of things. But I think today we do need to, because of time, because of the 27th, and needing to have this in place, we would need to decide on an amount. So.
So here's a thought. I agree. We need to decide on an amount, and I'm at 25. One of the things we have got a lot of requests for is kind of an outside budget analysis. And if you could, can you let us know how much that would cost at a future meeting? Research that and let us know. And then we can decide if that price is worth it to us. But it would be nice to know what that price is. But for today, I think we asked for 25 million again. In fact, I'm ready. Well, should I move? I'm ready to move to say let's ask for. Oh,
Before
no?
you move, no,
Okay.
that's fine, you can move. Before you move, I just want to make commitments that you're going to go through a budget where we can even better. Some of this probably does need to go towards deferred maintenance. I'd prefer lower, doesn't sound like that's going to be an option. So I think I've explained myself clear enough.
Do you want to move? Okay. All right. Except what is the movement? Is it in here?
I'm not sure. I don't see it in front of me. I don't know. But you could simply just make a motion to renew the, let's see, get the right language right. But basically just make a motion to bring back to the community a supplemental levy and the request of the original $25 million with really no changes in the line descriptions, any of that stuff. It all stays the same, just minus perpetuity. And
Okay.
then no plant facility levy.
Okay. So I move to approve. Is there a resolution? Okay. I move to approve a resolution to send a $25 million supplemental levy to the May whatever election, 16th election, removing the words in perpetuity from the previous ask and no SPFL levy this time.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Well,
Oh,
hold on.
oh, any
Just
other discussion?
clarification, Yeah. That's a 2-year levy request, is that correct?
2-year levy request, yes, 2-year levy request.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, motion passes.
Just real quick, Ally and Leslie, Heather and Rebecca, I think it would be a great sign of our willingness to work together, maybe that we agree here now that we will look to tighten the budget, and any money we can save on, we will apply to deferred maintenance. Can we
I would support
commit to that?
As well as continuing to look at the areas that we need to rebuild trust and communicate and to do that work together, to work on that together and to push out to our different communities and our different circles that we work and move in. All right. Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. We will, we are going to move into executive session, and I'm going to read that right now. We are going to move into executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061B to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, or public school student. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Morrisroe?
Yes.
Trustee Henry?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson? Yes.
All right, we'll take 10 minutes.